Hello Year 5 and welcome to your reading lesson for today. So we're going to start off nice and easy because I know we've had a week off. So we're going to look at retrieving key information from our text, okay? So we're going to look at identifying the new vocabulary in the correct context. We're going to go through and have a look at some of our words, and we're going to look at the different synonyms and the antonyms and how it's used in our story. Then we're going to look again at understanding what it means to retrieve information. What are the key skills with retrieving information? What are the different types of questions? What might they be asking? What do we need to look out for? We're going to identify the keywords in those questions. So it's always important to think, well, what is the question asking me? And what's the key information in that question that's going to help me find that answer? And then we're going to have a go at answering some different retrieval style questions. I'm not going to focus on one specific question. We're going to have a go at looking at 2 or 3 different ones. And then I'm going to mix up a little bit for your task, okay? Because I think we've gone through most of the retrieval style questions now, so we can start to mix it up a little bit. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. So let's have a look at one of our first words on here. So on page 80, one of the sentences says, could be a rave, Ben whispered hoarsely. Okay, so the word we're going to be looking at is hoarsely. Now you might have heard someone describe their voice as being quite hoarse when they've had a cough or a cold. And it's almost like when they start to lose their voice a little bit. Now it's an adverb, so it describes how someone says something. So you could change it to an adjective where someone has a hoarse voice, or you can say that someone spoke hoarsely. Okay, so that's the adverb. So it's 2 syllables, hoarsely. So we've got the suffix ly that's been added onto the end there. And like I said, it's a bit like having a rough, almost like a rough voice or like a harsh sound. It's a bit scratchy, it's a bit rough, it's a bit, or it's a bit husky. And it might usually be when someone has a bit of a cold or a cough, and it sounds like they almost need to cough. It's almost like they've got something stuck in their throat. So different synonyms could be raspy. When someone has a raspy voice, it's got that sort of crackling, croaky sound to it. You've got husky. And obviously, the opposite of that would be to have a mellow, very soft, very clear, very easy voice to be able to listen to. Now, one of the interesting things about our word hoarsely here, it's actually a homophone. Now, I think we're looking at a homophone in one of our spelling lessons. I think it's our spelling lesson this week, actually. Let me double check. Is it our spelling lesson this week? It is our spelling lesson this week. So we're going to be looking at homophones. So you might have a little inkling here of what homophone is. So if we have a look at here, we've got horse and horse. Now, what do you notice about those 2 words if I say them out loud? Horse and horse. You know, sound exactly the same. But what do you notice that's then different? Yeah, they're not spelt the same. So homophones are words that sound the same, but are spelt differently or have different meanings to the words. Now, here, if we have a look at this word horse, okay, this is when we have, this is a horse, this is the animal, okay, so this is the noun. When we describe something as being hoarse, that's when we describe someone as having a hoarse voice. So here we say, instead of a hoarse voice, we said we found hoarse voice. So it's that link between the idea of the animal and the description of how someone's voice sounds. So sometimes you have to be careful with your spellings, because otherwise you might be spelling the word horse here and actually be describing the animal rather than the sound of someone's voice. So a homophone is a word that sounds the same but is spelt differently and has a different meaning. A bit like see and see. I might see something over there, or I might go to the sea. And obviously that's spelled S-E-E and S-E-A. But I'm not going to give too many away for you, because we'll do this in our spelling lesson on Wednesday. So we're going to look at the word hoarsely. That's going to come up in our work today. Now, it's really hard to find a picture for this word because it's a very difficult word to try and explain. Now, page 82, the quote is, the storm slackened as if lying down to sleep. Now, that last part of the sentence almost helps give away the definition of what it means. So we're going to look at the word slackened, which is a verb. Now, it's 2 syllables, slackened, and obviously it's past tense because we've got the ed suffix on the end. Now, when we say that something slackens, or if you say something, or can you slacken this for me, which you wouldn't really use the word in that particular context, but it means to loosen something. Now, if I said to you, now when I've heard the word, I might say, well, I've got to pick up the slack. So I would say that someone might have started a job, not done it very well, or, put very little effort into it, done very little to it, and it all needs coming together. Somebody else has got to pick up the slack, so pick up the leftover work, and it's almost then to make something tighter again, so to pull something back. So to define something as slacken, it's when it loosens, it backs off in a way, so it loosens, it relaxes, it lessens. And obviously the opposite to loosen something would be to tighten something, or to make something firmer or stronger. So when we're describing the storm here as slacking, obviously a storm can be quite heavy, quite dominant. You've got the rain, you've got the thunder, you've got the lightning. When it slackens, or it lessens, or relaxes, It's effectively describing the storm as almost fading. Okay, it's starting to disappear. The heaviness of the rain is starting to slow down. There's no lightning, there's no thunder. The sky starts to get a bit brighter. When that storm slackens, it's almost like the storm backs off. When it says it's lying down to sleep, it's almost like it's resting. So it's no longer fighting and aggravating the sky. It's calming down in a way. So the word slacken is going to pop up in our work today as well. Now, this is four or 5 pages that I think we're reading today. Okay, so you have all these pages in front of you. And again, I've scanned them, so this should be a lot clearer for us to be able to read now. So we're going to pick up from chapter 11. So if we go back to chapter 10 that you would have looked at on the last day of term, this is when the dragons become aware. This is when Firedrake's obviously been found by the mountain elves, and Goldenbeard has now clocked on as another dragon. And he's obviously sent his little spy off to go and spy on them. And obviously Sorrel's not giving away very much information at all. So this is where the Firedrake, Ben and Sorrel want to try and set off and try and escape, okay? But obviously they're now going to be almost trapped in this idea of a storm that's coming. So, same rules as usual. If you want to go off and you want to read it on your own, that's fine. If you want, you can stick around and you can listen to me read it with you. So, chapter 11, The Storm. The mountain dwarves had long ago fallen asleep in their caves when Firedrake prepared to set off. This time Ben clambered up on his back to sit in front, holding his compass. I don't know if anyone's ever seen a compass or done orienteering or mountain climbing. A compass is a little dial, and it's got a magnetic field in it, and it tracks as to where is north, south, east and west. So it helps you be able to track the direction of which you're travelling in. He had spent hours studying the rat's map, memorising every detail. The mountains round which they would fly, the rivers they would follow, the cities they had better avoid. And first they had to go several hundreds of miles further south, making for the Mediterranean. Now the Mediterranean Sea is close to where we've got the hotter countries, so we're getting close to the equator here. If they were in luck, they'd land at its shores before dawn. When is dawn? Okay, we've looked at this in our science topic. Is dawn in the morning or is it in the evening? Good, well done, it's in the morning. With a few powerful wing beats, the dragon rose into the air. The sky was clear above the mountains. The waxing moon hung bright among thousands of stars, and only a light wind blew towards them. Now we know what a waxing moon is because we've looked at the phases of the moon. So know when it's waxing, it's getting bigger. Okay, so this is when we've started coming from our new moon. We've got halfway through our cycle, and now our moon has now got bigger. So we've gone from the new moon, and now it's got bigger. Okay. Now this is when it's almost the full-size moon. So imagine if we've taken away that almost that curve bit, the banana part of it. The world, where was I? I've completely lost my place now. With a few powerful wing beats, the dragon rose into the air. The sky was clear above the mountains. The waxing moon hung bright among the thousands of stars, and only a light wind blew towards them. The world was so silent that Ben could hear Sorrel munching a mushroom behind him. Firedrake's wings rushed through the cool air. When they had left the mountains behind them, Ben turned to take one last look at the Black Peak. For a moment, he thought he saw a large bird in the darkness with a tiny figure sitting on its back. "Sorrel," he whispered, "look behind you. Can you see anything?" Sorrel put down the mushroom she was nibbling and looked over her shoulder. "Nothing to worry about," she said. "But it could be a raven," Ben whispered hoarsely. "The rat warned us against ravens, didn't he? Isn't there something sitting on it?" "Yes, there is," Sorrel returned to her mushroom. "That's why there's no need to worry. It's an elf. Elves love flying in the moonlight. We only have to feel suspicious when ravens without riders, and even they can't keep up with a dragon in flight for very long unless they have magic powers." An elf? Ben looked around again, but the bird and its rider had disappeared as if the night had swallowed them up. "They've gone," murmured Ben. "I wonder who you think that could potentially have been." "You bet they've gone, probably on their way to one of those silly elf dances." Sorrel threw the bitter remains of her mushroom into the darkness below and wiped her mouth. That horn of plenty was delicious. During the next few hours, Ben frequently looked back over his shoulder. So frequently means to do it quite often, so he's always looking behind. But he never saw the figure riding the bird again. So he feels anxious about something. He thinks he's being followed. And if anything, he probably has good reason to think that they're being followed. Firedrake was flying south faster than the wind. Ben kept asking Sorrel what her keen browny eyes could see on the earth below, for he himself could not make out anything in the darkness but the rivers and the lakes that reflected in the moonlight in the waters. Working as a team, the two of them steered the dragon past cities and other dangerous places, just as the rat had advised. When day dawned, they found a place to rest in an olive grove near the Greek coast. So we're on the coast of Greece now, so we're getting close to the Mediterranean. They slept all day, surrounded by chirping cicadas, and off set again at the moonrise. Now, you might not know what a cicadas is, but it's going to be some form of bird because it's chirping, and we know that birds chirp, so we've got some Mediterranean birds here that live on the Greek islands. Firedrake turned southeast towards the Syrian coast. It was a mild night with a hot southerly wind blowing over the sea. Before dawn, however, the weather changed. The wind that had been blowing them towards all of them this whole time grew stronger and stronger. Firedrake tried to avoid it. He rose higher and then dropped lower, but the wind was everywhere. The dragon was finding it more and more difficult to keep going. Clouds towered like mountains ahead of them. Thunder rolled and lightning flashes lit up the sky. Okay, so we're going to get stuck in quite a nasty storm here. We're swerving off course, Firedrake, cried Ben. The wind is driving you south. I can't make any headway against it, the dragon called back. He braced himself against the invisible enemy with all of his might, but the wind carried him away, howling in his ears, forcing him towards the foaming waves. Ben and Sorrel clung desperately to the spines of Firedrake's crest. Luckily, Sorrel tied herself firmly in place too, for without the straps holding them, they would have slipped off Firedrake's back and fallen into the depths below. Rain lashed down from the towering clouds. Soon the dragon's spines were so slippery that his riders found it difficult to hold on, and Sorrel had to cling to Ben's back. The sea was raging down below. A few islands lay among the waves, but there was no other land in sight. I think we're being blown towards the coast of Egypt, Ben yelled. Sorrel clung to him even tighter. Coast, she shouted back. A coast sounds good, never mind what coast, just as long as we don't get blown into the briny down there. The sun was rising, but only as a pallid light behind dark clouds. So pallid means very, very faint. Firedrake was in difficulties. The storm forced him down towards the waves again and again, until Ben and Sorrel could feel the surf spraying into their faces. Now that tells them they must be really close to the top of these waves to have that back spray of the salty sea. Does that brilliant map of yours say anything about the weather in these parts? Shouted Ben to Sorrel. Ben's hair was dripping wet and his ears hurt from the noise of the storm. He could tell that Firedrake's wings were growing heavier and heavier. The coast, he called, the coast where the storm's driving us. He wiped water out of his eyes. Is full of yellow patches, covered with them. They saw a ship tossing like a cork on the foaming water below. Then a strip of coastline suddenly emerged from the mist. Oh, no, emerged, it means it comes out, it comes towards you. There, cried Ben, land ahoy, Firedrake. Can you get that far? With the last of his strength, the dragon steeled himself against the wind and slowly, very slowly, approached the safety of the shore. Beneath them, the sea was lashing low cliffs where palm trees were bowed in the wind. We're going to make it, shouted Sorrel, digging her little claws through Ben's pullover. We're going to make it! Ben saw the sun rising higher among ragged clouds. The sky was slowly brightening. The storm slackened, as if lying down to sleep as the day dawned. So that's the word slacken. It's cooling off now. It's retreating. With a couple of final wing beats, the dragon left the sea behind, descended even lower, and landed, exhausted, on fine, soft sand. Ben and Sorrel undid their sodden straps and slid off Firedrake's back. The dragon had laid his head on the sand and closed his eyes. I'm going to pause there because we'll add on to that sentence tomorrow.